There's a damaged manuscript in Beethoven's handwriting, a scar carved across its cover in a moment of fury. It was meant to be his greatest tribute, dedicated to a man he once deeply admired, Napoleon Bonaparte. But something changed. In a sudden fit of anger, Beethoven took a knife and tore through Napoleon's name, scratching it out so deeply that he ripped the paper. What could drive Beethoven, a man who once saw Napoleon as the embodiment of liberty and courage, to reject him so completely? How did a musical masterpiece that began as a tribute turn into a symbol of disillusionment? Today, we're diving into one of history's most fascinating connections between a composer and an emperor. This is a story of admiration that soured into betrayal, of a symphony that found a new purpose, reborn with a different, defiant message. Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, once dedicated to Napoleon, transformed into a bold statement on ambition, human frailty, and the delicate line between heroism and hubris. So what exactly shattered Beethoven's devotion, and how did this act of defiance shape a piece of music that would ultimately change the course of symphonic history? Stay with us as we unravel what drove Beethoven to cross out Napoleon's name and discover the message he left hidden in the notes of the Eroica Symphony. Ludwig van Beethoven's early life was marked by hardship and relentless discipline. His father, Johann, a court musician with a heavy drinking problem, pushed Beethoven with intense rigor, seeing his son as a prodigy in the making. Beethoven was barely a child when his father began forcing him to practice late into the night, often waking him from bed to play for guests or repeat scales until exhaustion set in. These experiences hardened Beethoven's spirit, leaving him with fierce independence and a defiant drive that would shape his future. By his teenage years, Beethoven's musical gifts were unmistakable. Playing in the courts of Bonn, he began to attract attention, yet he always seemed different from the refined musicians around him. Beethoven was not one to flatter aristocrats or bow to social hierarchies. He was blunt, often abrasive, and refused to play the role of the obedient artist. From a young age, Beethoven saw himself as an outsider, a commoner with uncommon talent and the resolve to use it. For Beethoven, music was far more than entertainment. It was a vessel for truth, an art form that could express what words couldn't. Deeply influenced by the Enlightenment ideals spreading across Europe, freedom, individual rights, and the hope for a more just society, Beethoven believed music could communicate these values in ways that transcended language and class. At 22, Beethoven left Bonn for Vienna, the musical capital of Europe. Vienna was alive with culture and elite gatherings, where composers like Haydn and Mozart had left their mark. Beethoven quickly gained recognition, though he was no darling of the aristocracy. His intense, sometimes volatile personality set him apart. Known to walk out of rooms if he felt disrespected or challenged social norms with almost rebellious defiance, Beethoven wanted his music to speak to everyone, not just the wealthy few, but to the broader human experience. As Beethoven's fame grew, so did his ambition. He began envisioning compositions that could capture the full range of human emotions, works that would defy conventions and break musical boundaries. He rejected the idea of composing merely for entertainment or prestige. Instead, he saw his music as a reflection of his innermost beliefs, a mirror of his soul and ideals. Beethoven wanted his art to transcend social classes, to reach people from all walks of life, and inspire them with a sense of power and possibility. During this time, Beethoven began experimenting with bold new musical ideas. He became known for infusing compositions with raw emotional depth that was rare in classical forms, unafraid to use dissonance, unexpected harmonies, and intense dynamics to convey struggle, triumph, and despair. Beethoven believed that music should reflect life itself, with all its turbulence and beauty, and his works began to embody this philosophy, becoming powerful statements of individuality and resilience. Yet Beethoven's life was far from easy. As his career progressed, he faced the devastating reality of his worsening hearing loss. For a composer whose world revolved around sound, this was an unimaginable tragedy. Beethoven was only in his late 20s when he began to notice the first signs, ringing in his ears, moments when voices and music grew faint. At first, he tried to hide it, fearing that news of his deafness would ruin his reputation. But as the years went on, his condition worsened, and Beethoven was forced to confront a future where he might be completely cut off from the music he loved. In moments of despair, Beethoven even considered ending his life. Yet in this personal turmoil, he found a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that despite his suffering, he had a duty to his art and to the ideals that had guided him all his life. Beethoven's resilience became a defining aspect of his character, a refusal to let even the harshest of fates silence him. He resolved to keep composing, pouring his pain, defiance, and hope into his work. During this period of struggle and self-discovery, Beethoven began composing music that defied expectations. He sought to capture the human experience in all its complexity, creating works that spoke to the triumph of spirit over adversity. His compositions became more than just music. They were powerful expressions of freedom, courage, and the will to persevere. Every note was an assertion of Beethoven's belief in human potential and his conviction that individuals could rise above their circumstances. His music became a testament to his vision of a world where people could live freely, unburdened by tyranny or oppression. Beethoven saw himself as an artist who could inspire others to look beyond their limitations, to dream of a life defined by courage and purpose. Napoleon Bonaparte's journey from a young, ambitious outsider to the ruler of France is a testament to his relentless drive, tactical brilliance, and his vision to reshape Europe. Born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, Napoleon wasn't born into privilege. His family, while of minor noble status, held neither wealth nor influence. Corsica had only recently become French territory, and Napoleon often felt torn between his Corsican heritage and his desire to excel within French society. Napoleon's father, Carlo Bonaparte, was determined to secure a better future for his son. Through connections and perseverance, Carlo managed to enroll young Napoleon in a prestigious military academy in France when he was just 9 years old. Napoleon struggled to fit in. His thick Corsican accent and outsider status made him a target for mockery among his aristocratic peers. Yet Napoleon responded with fierce resolve, focusing entirely on his studies. He excelled in mathematics, history, and military strategy, developing a sharp, calculating mind and an ambition that would come to define his life. At 16, Napoleon joined the French military as a second lieutenant. Though he climbed the ranks, his ambition met resistance. His Corsican roots and outsider status made it challenging to gain full acceptance among French officers. However, the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789 turned the social and political order on its head, providing new opportunities for those with talent and determination. With France in upheaval, rank and birthright lost power. For someone as driven as Napoleon, the revolution was a gateway, a chance to prove his worth on a national level. Napoleon's first major test came in 1793 during the Siege of Toulon, where he led a daring assault against British forces. His success marked him as a rising star in the French military, earning him a promotion to brigadier general at just 24. Word of his victory spread, and Napoleon quickly became known across France for his boldness and strategic genius. He soon received command of the French army in Italy, where he would prove himself even further. The Italian campaign became a turning point in Napoleon's career. Confronted with an under-resourced and outnumbered army, Napoleon transformed his troops into a disciplined, fiercely loyal force. His soldiers saw him not just as a commander, but as a leader who endured their hardships, shared their dangers, and led them to victory. Under his leadership, they won battle after battle, defeating the Austrians and signing the Treaty of Campo Formio, which gave France control over much of northern Italy. Napoleon's ability to inspire loyalty, along with his innovative tactics, propelled him to national acclaim. Returning to France as a hero, Napoleon's popularity soared beyond the military. To many, he embodied the revolution's promise, a man who rose through talent and drive, not birthright. Yet Napoleon's ambitions stretched beyond battlefield victories. He wanted to bring stability to a country exhausted by years of revolutionary upheaval. In his mind, he could do more than lead armies. He could guide France into a new era of order and glory. In 1799, Napoleon seized his chance. Orchestrating a coup, he installed himself as first consul, effectively becoming the ruler of France. Though he presented himself as a servant of the people, dedicated to restoring order, his power was increasingly absolute. To many, he was a hero who had saved France from chaos. But some sensed his ambition extending beyond the revolution's ideals. Once in power, Napoleon launched sweeping reforms to reshape France. He created a centralized government focused around his authority. One of his most enduring legacies was the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal system that established equality before the law, a secular state, and protections for property. The code brought order and stability to France, and its principles would influence law for generations. To Napoleon, these reforms symbolized progress, a way of solidifying France's unity under his vision. Yet even these accomplishments did not fully satisfy Napoleon. He saw himself as a figure destined for greatness, a man whose legacy would stretch far beyond France's borders. His achievements had won him respect, but he now sought something more enduring. To secure his place in history, Napoleon decided to crown himself Emperor of the French. In a meticulously staged ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral in 1804, Napoleon took the crown from the Pope and placed it on his own head, a gesture that left no doubt about where his power originated. To some, this act was the ultimate betrayal of revolutionary ideals. Napoleon, once a symbol of the people's rise, now seemed like the very authority he had once opposed. To others, the coronation marked France's strength and stability, a sign that the country had emerged from revolution to embrace a new order. Napoleon Bonaparte was not only a leader, but a force that transformed the battlefield, wielding wars as tools of political change and territorial expansion. His campaigns became legendary for their speed, precision, and sheer audacity, reflecting his ambition to expand France's influence across Europe and leave an indelible mark on history. From the Italian campaigns that launched his career to the disastrous Russian invasion that marked the beginning of his end, Napoleon's wars reshaped Europe and his own life in ways few could have foreseen. One of Napoleon's earliest defining moments came with his assignment to lead the French army of Italy in 1796. Only 26 years old, Napoleon took command of a ragtag army that was poorly supplied and outnumbered by Austrian and Piedmontese forces. Most commanders might have seen the situation as hopeless, but Napoleon had a vision. Through relentless attacks, bold tactics, and swift movement, he defeated the Austrians and forced them to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, giving France control over parts of northern Italy. This Italian campaign did more than secure a victory. It began the legend of Napoleon. His soldiers saw him as a near-mythical leader, a man who shared their hardships, ate with them, and led them to triumph against formidable odds. Known to his troops as the Little Corporal, Napoleon inspired loyalty that would carry him through future battles. His leadership and the victories in Italy earned him admiration and solidified his reputation as a daring commander across France. With his success in Italy, Napoleon's fame soared. The French government saw in him a leader who could bring both prestige and security to the nation. Yet Napoleon's ambitions extended beyond Italy. In 1798, he set his sights on Egypt, aiming to disrupt British trade routes to India and expand French influence into the Middle East. Unlike a typical military campaign, the Egyptian campaign combined conquest with scientific exploration, as Napoleon brought along scholars, scientists, and artists to document ancient ruins and study Egyptian civilization. However, Egypt was also the site of one of Napoleon's first significant setbacks. While he won several battles on land, including the Battle of the Pyramids, the British fleet, under Admiral Horatio Nelson, destroyed the French navy in the Battle of the Nile. This defeat left Napoleon and his troops stranded in Egypt without reinforcements. Yet even in failure, Napoleon's charisma and strategic focus remained intact. He held his ground and eventually returned to France as a hero, with his reputation largely untarnished by the setback. Back in Europe, Napoleon's ambitions continued to grow. In 1805, he faced a powerful alliance of Austrian and Russian forces in one of his most celebrated battles, the Battle of Austerlitz, also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors. Outnumbered and surrounded, Napoleon used deception to lure the Allies into a trap, then inflicted a decisive defeat. Austerlitz became a masterpiece of military strategy, solidifying his status as one of history's greatest tacticians. With this victory, Napoleon brought much of Europe under his influence, establishing himself as a ruler of unmatched power. Following Austerlitz, Napoleon's campaigns grew even more ambitious. He defeated Prussia at the Battle of Jena-Auerstedt in 1806, bringing the powerful kingdom to its knees. The following year, he faced Russia, and after a brutal campaign, he secured the Treaty of Tilsit, effectively dividing Europe between France and Russia. By this point, Napoleon's empire stretched from the Iberian Peninsula to the borders of Russia, making him the most powerful ruler on the continent. But Napoleon's relentless expansion came at a cost. His constant wars strained France's resources, stretched his armies thin, and stirred unrest among the territories he conquered. Nationalist movements began to rise in countries under French control, and people who had once welcomed Napoleon as a liberator now viewed him as an occupier. Despite the growing resistance, Napoleon's ambition continued to push him forward. In 1812, he launched his most daring campaign yet, the invasion of Russia. Confident that a swift victory would bring Russia under his influence, he marched into Russian territory with an army of over 500,000 soldiers, a force so vast it seemed unstoppable. However, the Russian campaign would prove to be his undoing. The Russian army avoided direct confrontation, retreating deeper into Russian territory while employing a scorched earth policy, burning crops and villages to deprive the French forces of supplies. By the time Napoleon's forces reached Moscow, they found a city in flames, abandoned by its people. Facing a brutal winter with no provisions, Napoleon had no choice but to order a retreat. What followed was a nightmare. Freezing temperatures, starvation, and relentless attacks from Russian forces decimated the once mighty Grande Armée. Of the 600,000 men who had entered Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned to France. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte reached a moment that would forever change both his legacy and Beethoven's vision of him. France, exhausted by years of conflict and revolution, craved stability. Napoleon, who had risen to power as first consul, had led the nation through battles that brought both pride and a renewed sense of unity. But Napoleon's ambitions went beyond influence. He envisioned an empire under his absolute rule. On December 2, 1804, under the soaring arches of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, Napoleon took the final step in his journey to power. In a carefully staged ceremony, he crowned himself Emperor of the French. By placing the crown upon his own head, Napoleon made a bold statement. His authority came from no one but himself. For many, this act was the height of ambition, the mark of a leader unafraid to shape his own destiny. But to others, it was a betrayal of the revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity that had originally lifted him. To Beethoven, this shift in Napoleon's path felt deeply personal. He had seen Napoleon as a champion of freedom and of the common man, an embodiment of the Enlightenment ideals Beethoven so valued. He had believed Napoleon would be the one to dismantle tyranny, not embody it. But the news of Napoleon's self-coronation shattered Beethoven's admiration. The man he had revered as a symbol of courage and integrity now seemed transformed, no longer a defender of freedom but a figure of personal ambition and absolute rule. The title page of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, inscribed with a dedication to Bonaparte, now felt almost mocking. In a surge of anger, Beethoven took up a knife and violently scratched out Napoleon's name, leaving a deep scar in the paper. To Beethoven, this was more than a physical act. It was a rejection of ideals he had once projected onto another. Yet Beethoven did not abandon the Eroica. Stripped of its dedication, the symphony evolved into something far greater, a meditation on heroism itself. In Napoleon, Beethoven had once seen the personification of greatness, but now he sought to capture something more complex, the resilience of the human spirit, the flawed nature of ambition, and the blurred line between glory and downfall. In the Eroica, Beethoven poured his own vision of heroism, one that could outlast individuals and endure across generations. The Eroica Symphony would become one of Beethoven's most celebrated works, defying musical conventions and expanding the boundaries of composition. Its powerful, deeply personal tone reflected not only Beethoven's initial admiration, but also his disillusionment, creating a piece that resonated with listeners as a statement on greatness itself. Napoleon's transformation from revolutionary hero to emperor struck Beethoven as a profound betrayal. But in the end, it inspired a masterpiece with a universal message. Beethoven's symphony became a testament to ideals that were now beyond any one man's reach. As Beethoven's music moved toward the timeless, Napoleon's empire was still rising, driven by the very ambitions that had reshaped Beethoven's perspective. With the Eroica, Beethoven shifted his vision from the personal to the universal, crafting a piece that spoke to the endurance of ideals. And as Napoleon's power continued to expand, Beethoven's music became a lasting reminder of the difference between ambition and integrity. Beethoven's Eroica Symphony was a groundbreaking work, pushing the boundaries of what a symphony could express. Composed between 1803 and 1804, it was longer, bolder, and more emotionally complex than anything listeners had heard before. Originally titled Sinfonia Eroica, or Heroic Symphony, Beethoven envisioned it as a tribute to the ideals he once saw embodied in Napoleon: courage, freedom, and the resilience of the human spirit. However, after Napoleon crowned himself emperor, Beethoven transformed the symphony into something deeper, a reflection on heroism itself. exploring the complex, often painful journey of those who pursue greatness. Each movement in the Eroica Symphony builds on this theme in unique and evolving ways, creating a layered narrative that speaks to both human triumph and tragedy. The symphony opens with a powerful and intense first movement, bursting with boldness and energy. From the emphatic opening chords, it's clear that this composition is no ordinary tribute. The movement is grand and dynamic, with melodies that seem to embody the determination of a hero embarking on an arduous journey. Here, Beethoven captures the raw ambition and drive to reach something greater, celebrating strength and aspiration. Through shifting tempos, unexpected harmonies, and surging rhythms, Beethoven invites the listener to feel the pulse of human ambition, unfiltered and alive. In stark contrast, the second movement, Marcia Funèbre, or Funeral March, takes on a somber and reflective tone, plunging the symphony into sorrow and introspection. Beethoven's music here grieves the loss of idealized heroism, mourning not only a hero, but the very fragility of human ambition. With haunting, solemn melodies, the Funeral March becomes a meditation on the inevitability of disillusionment, as Beethoven seems to acknowledge that even the loftiest ideals can be compromised. The music unfolds with a dirge-like pace, evoking the weight of disappointment and loss. The third movement, in contrast, revives the spirit of the symphony with a lively, energetic scherzo. Here, Beethoven seems to regain a sense of resilience, signaling that while heroes may fall, the human spirit endures. This movement's rhythm and playfulness break away from the solemnity of the Funeral March, suggesting a renewal of hope and the persistence of ideals despite setbacks. It's as if Beethoven is reminding himself and his listeners that while individual heroes may falter, the ideals they inspire live on. The music dances with vitality, a celebration of resilience in the face of loss. The final movement of the Eroica is triumphant yet nuanced, blending joy, sorrow, and introspection into a powerful conclusion. Beethoven brings together the emotional journey of the previous sections, presenting both a celebration of heroism and an acknowledgement of its flaws. Here he accepts the duality of greatness, the triumph, and the imperfection. The music oscillates between exhilaration and contemplation, recognizing that true heroism encompasses both ambition and humility, both victory and defeat. Beethoven weaves together themes of struggle and resilience, closing the symphony with a resolution that feels deeply earned, a testament to the full spectrum of human ambition. Ultimately, Beethoven's Eroica Symphony transcended its original purpose, becoming more than a tribute to a single man. Stripped of its dedication to Napoleon, it stands as a testament to the universal concept of heroism, a vision that is complex, imperfect, and deeply human. Through the Eroica, Beethoven created a work that speaks to anyone who has ever struggled, hoped, or felt disillusioned, capturing the raw emotion and resilience of the human spirit. In crafting the Eroica, Beethoven redefined the symphony itself, transforming his disappointment in Napoleon into a masterpiece that resonates with generations. His music became a lasting testament not only to Beethoven's resilience, but to the power of art to capture the full range of human experience. As Beethoven's ideals found new expression in music, Napoleon's ambition continued to drive him, setting the stage for a campaign that would ultimately bring his greatest triumphs and his most profound failures. Napoleon Bonaparte's ambition, which had lifted him to unprecedented heights of power, ultimately led to his downfall. After years of relentless conquest, the man once celebrated as a liberator had, for many, become a tyrant whose insatiable drive plunged Europe into near-constant warfare. By the early 1810s, both his empire and his influence were beginning to crumble as resistance to his rule spread across the continent. One of the pivotal moments in Napoleon's decline came in 1812, when he made the fateful decision to invade Russia. At the time, France's empire stretched across much of Europe, but Russia, still independent and increasingly defiant, remained a looming threat to Napoleon's dominance. Confident that a swift, decisive victory would bring Russia under his control, Napoleon launched an invasion with over 600,000 soldiers, a force so vast it seemed unstoppable. Yet the Russian campaign would become a disastrous miscalculation. The Russian army, avoiding direct confrontation, retreated deeper into Russian territory while employing a scorched earth policy, burning crops, livestock, and villages to deprive the advancing French army of vital supplies. As Napoleon's forces pressed on, they found themselves surrounded by desolation, with no food, shelter, or resources. By the time they reached Moscow, They found a city in flames, abandoned by its people and stripped of anything of value. Facing a brutal winter with no provisions, Napoleon was forced to order a retreat. The retreat from Moscow became a nightmare. As winter set in, temperatures plummeted, and the French soldiers, unprepared for the Russian cold, suffered tremendously. Starvation, exposure, and relentless attacks from Russian forces decimated the once mighty Grande Armée. Of the 600,000 soldiers who had entered Russia, fewer than 100,000 would return to France. What had begun as a demonstration of Napoleon's unbreakable power ended as a harrowing testament to his catastrophic overreach. The Russian campaign shattered the illusion of Napoleon's invincibility and would become synonymous with the perils of unchecked ambition. With Napoleon's forces weakened, the rest of Europe saw a rare opportunity to strike. Nations that had been subjugated or intimidated under his rule began to rally against him, forming the Sixth Coalition. Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia united to confront the weakened French Empire, and in 1813, they faced Napoleon's forces in Germany at the Battle of Leipzig, also known as the Battle of Nations. This was one of the largest battles in European history, with over 500,000 troops engaged. At Leipzig, Napoleon's army suffered a crushing defeat. Surrounded by his enemies, he found himself outmatched by the sheer weight of Allied forces. The coalition closed in on Napoleon from all directions, marking the beginning of the end for his empire. As the Allies advanced toward France, Napoleon's grip on power weakened, and even his once loyal marshals and generals began to question his leadership. In 1814, coalition forces invaded France itself, advancing toward Paris. Napoleon fought with relentless determination, showcasing his tactical brilliance in a series of defensive battles. But he was fighting a losing war. His resources were depleted, his troops exhausted, and support for his rule fading rapidly. Faced with the inevitability of defeat, Napoleon was forced to abdicate. On April 6, 1814, he relinquished the throne and was exiled to the island of Elba, a small Mediterranean territory where he would live under guard, far from the empire he had once commanded. However, Napoleon's story was not yet over. Less than a year later, he made a daring escape from Elba and returned to France, rallying support in a final bid to reclaim his throne. His return sparked panic across Europe, and what followed became known as the 100 Days, a dramatic, brief resurgence of his power. Marching triumphantly toward Paris, Napoleon once again gathered an army, reigniting the loyalty and fervor of the French people who had grown disillusioned with the restored monarchy. Europe's response was swift and unified. The coalition powers quickly mobilized to stop him, determined to end Napoleon's influence once and for all. The climactic showdown came at the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815. Facing British and Prussian forces under the command of the Duke of Wellington and Marshal Blucher, Napoleon's army fought fiercely, but the odds were stacked against him. Despite his tactical brilliance, Napoleon could not overcome the combined forces of the Allies. After hours of brutal combat, his forces were defeated, and Napoleon's reign came to a final, irrevocable end. Captured and stripped of his power, Napoleon was exiled once more, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, thousands of miles from Europe. Here, isolated and far from the continent he had once ruled, Napoleon spent the remaining years of his life. It was a tragic and lonely end for a man who had once commanded the loyalty of millions and reshaped the course of European history. In 1821, at the age of 51, Napoleon died on St. Helena, his legacy forever marked by both his triumphs and his failures. Napoleon's downfall left a lasting impact on Europe. His wars and ambitions had redrawn borders, toppled monarchies, and left an indelible mark on the continent's political landscape. Though his legal reforms and administrative changes endured, the devastation his campaigns brought could not be overlooked. Napoleon's rise and fall became a powerful cautionary tale, embodying the double-edged nature of ambition, the power to inspire and the potential to destroy. From afar, Beethoven watched as Napoleon's story came full circle. The man he had once admired as a hero had fallen, his empire reduced to ruins. In his music, Beethoven captured both the hope and the disillusionment he felt, reflecting the journey of a man who had once stood for freedom, but whose ambition ultimately led to his undoing.